Dr. Mark Jangizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about avalanches and mass hysteria. A lot of people have a lot of trouble trying to wrap their heads around these kinds of psychosocietal forces and mass hysteria that's affected the world. And folks on my side want to see that there's a pandemic, somebody that initiated and planned this in advance and caused all of this. Of course, there's a lot of bad actors that we've talked about before. There's plenty of evil to go around. But in terms of the initiation of this, it's important, it's crucial that one understand the reasons for why it happened. If you get that wrong, we can't understand this or other kinds of totalitarian forces. We can't stop them. We can't make any kind of progress if you get the wrong answer to why this happened. So let's think about an avalanche. Now suppose that there's this mountain and then there's this tower on top of the mountain, and people like to go there. Tourists show up, and I show up and I take a marshmallow and from this up high, I throw it down onto the slope, and suddenly an avalanche happens. The question is, did I cause the avalanche? Now, what I didn't tell you in this made-up story is, let's suppose that this particular mountain, it's a thing, it's a cultural thing that people that go there bring marshmallows, and they like to throw them when they're up there on the surface of this, this cliffside, or not a cliff, but the slope side, because the marmots or whatever like to eat them, and it's just something that people do. Now, so it turns out that over the last 10 years, there's been tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of marshmallows thrown, and never was there an avalanche until I did it. So you should imagine now it's a little bit trickier. Did I really cause the avalanche, even if I had intended to cause the avalanche? There's a sense in which, well, no, I didn't really cause the avalanche at all. It was just mere happenstance that the surface was ready for an avalanche to happen. So the same kinds of things happen in mass hysterias. You can be China throwing lots and lots of marshmallows onto, the state, trying to push the state of all of the social network with all these minds. But if the entire network isn't ready to avalanche, you're not going to ever get it to avalanche. It's not going to happen. So now you could argue, well, what if somehow I knew I had set up sensors on this mountainside, and it alerted me. It says, okay, it's ready. Show up to the mountain because now it's ready to avalanche, and then I can throw my thing. Well, even so, even I could show up and I could throw it, and I could cause then an avalanche, and I could do it with predetermined. I did it on purpose. But then again, the next person that would have shown up, if they threw it, it was very likely to have an avalanche as well. So sure, I happened to cause it and I did it intentionally, but still, to understand the forces of why my throw caused the avalanche would have very little to do with my motivations. It wouldn't really help you to go, hey, what was Mark's motivations for throwing the marshmallow? And how did he actually throw it? Was there spin? Was there backspin? Did he throw it hard? None of that matters. What matters is the nature of the hillside itself, which is really why the avalanche happened, and not so much about the initial strike. Controlling the conditions on the entire mountainside, the entire pile of rock and the arrangements, is out of my control, out of the control of any of the people that show up to the hill. The same thing, the nature of the minds, the entire network of billions of minds throughout the social network is not something that any particular forces of evil could have controlled ahead of time. They could potentially have exploited it. There's plenty of people that exploited the fact that once the avalanche happens, they can exploit it and fill vacuums and do all kinds of things. But that's different from understanding the initiation of it. And another thing that's nice about avalanches is that once an avalanche happens, which again can be through the actual cause, can be just a very micro cause, and that's not really having much to do with the story. Once they happen, well, you'll find big rocks like Pharma or Amazon itself. They're moving. They are both, something causes them to move. They're not the reason the whole thing is moving, but they themselves bump into loads and loads of rocks and cause more destruction. This is what we find in these kinds of mass hysterias. There's lots of bad players who are causing havoc, but that again doesn't mean that they initiated it. They themselves, if they were more responsible, could try to stop and hold on and prevent themselves from bumping into and causing more havoc. But again, that's a different question than what started it all together. Nobody has the ability to shape the entire structure of the human minds across Earth and getting it ready to avalanche. That was something that we've talked about before. It happened by virtue of fear of infection. Humans are unfortunately prone to that kind of behavior, but it's not something that needs to be engineered per se by others. And that was your science moment.